Okay, well, nice to see you all. Let's uh, let's kick off. Go for it. Anyone
Good
like
morning.
to talk about anything, share anything, ask anything? Feel free.
Okay,
So,
I had a
go ahead.
question. I'm sorry,
No, go
Ray.
ahead. Go ahead.
Um, we've been all getting acquainted here.
Yeah.
This is going to sound like a funny question,
Okay.
but I got my spirit separated from my soul a year and a half ago, and I found that my spirit tends to be extremely independent,
Okay.
as I would term it. When she goes out, it leaves the rest of me pretty much unconscious.
All right.
And or if I am conscious, I'm not able to do anything until she comes back. But
All right.
do our
Yeah, go on, carry on.
care about our souls? I mean, do they love the rest of our being? Do you know? I'm just curious on that.
Well, yeah, because we're whole, in a sense. The way we separated up was not actually how it originally functioned, in that we're a whole being, body, soul, spirit in an integrated way. I mean, when I separated my soul when God separated my soul and spirit, he reintegrated me, so I became whole. And it sounds like you became even more separated. Whereas for me, the separation is only to separate from the way the soul has drawn from the spirit for independence, so their soul ties to the spirit. Once those are severed, God then connected me from the spirit to the soul on a long tether, because my soul and spirit were tethered together, which meant I couldn't be in two places at once. I could only be where both were. But as soon as that got severed, and therefore I'm untethered from the earth tethering, he put a long connection. So it's like I'm quantumly entangled. So my soul and spirit are totally connected all the time. What it happens is my spirit is active all the time, but my soul doesn't always know actually cognitively what I'm doing. But what I'm doing is always flowing to my soul, because I'm resonating with what I'm doing, even if I don't know. So essentially, like sitting here, my spirit is engaged in the realms of heaven, and it is flowing from the different places I are in heaven to my soul. So, which is why I can answer questions and talk about things that I've no idea of what they're coming up, because my spirit is already in the place of releasing stuff to flow into my soul. So I don't have to dredge up memory to answer questions, because it's coming out of my spiritual connection of being in heaven. Now that was a huge increase in my capacity to be able to do multiple things, because I am not only functioning when one part is cognitive. So that was a very different thing. Maybe you've missed out the reintegration stage of
I think
having,
it must be. Yeah. I need to talk to Father about that.
because essentially, I mean, God made us with a redemptive purpose and a redemptive gift, and our personality type, and all of that was part of God's breathing into us and us being a living being. So from that perspective, the soul is not a bad thing. The soul is a good thing, and the soul and spirit together and body is the best thing of being holistic, whole, in that way. But there are areas of the soul that need the renewing of the mind and the healing of our emotions and all those things. So yeah, I think for me, the separation of spirit and soul immediately created reintegration and wholeness, and I never felt more whole having that happened. So for me, it was a very, very positive thing that my spirit is always in the realms of heaven, and I'm not in a incapacitated state. In fact, the opposite. It's increased my capacity no end
Right.
from that point. Um, so
Was just I hadn't found anybody else who really that happened with, and so I was curious.
no, maybe it's just a disconnect, because in the other realm, people's souls can leave their body, and their spirit is still in their body, which gives them life, and they're connected by a silver cord. Because if their spirit, if their soul, if their spirit left their body, they would be dead. But of course, the Holy Spirit's presence in us is also life, and my spirit is connected to my soul, in a very real way, and I think in an intended way. The thing about Adam, Eve, their spirit was clothing them and hosting their soul body, and therefore they interacted with the physical realm through the spirit first. So they always had the spiritual perception of the realm in relationship with God. As soon as they stepped out of the relationship with God, the relationship to their spirit to the physical realm essentially internalized, and therefore everyone then engaged the physical realm with their soul. So everything then was information that was not filtered through spiritual understanding and relationship with God, but purely through the knowledge of the memory of the soul. And that's what causes most people's problems. We've learned everything about ourselves from the outside in, from what we've received from the physical world around us, without our spirit being able to filter that and says, that isn't true, that isn't true, that isn't true. This is the truth of eternal, God's eternal purpose. Well, when we then come back into a relationship between spirit and soul, there is a tension that takes place because the soul has been used to functioning purely independently. And now the spirit is now growing and in capacity with God. And the spirit then starts to exert influence on the soul, which I guess is what is talking about the wrestling between soul and spirit, which is mentioned obviously in Romans and other places. It's like the spirit wrestles against the flesh and the flesh against the spirit. Well, it's actually, well, who's in charge, And when the soul yields charge and yields and surrenders, then the spirit and soul then come back into the right relationship, not a continual separate relationship, which seems to be just a sort of a step missing. So what did you do to get your spirit and soul separated? What teaching did you use?
I was using Ian Clayton's.
Oh, okay. Well, that explains it. Yeah.
And but it was really funny because the whole time, right at the end, it really was like a physical battle. Where it wasn't an easy separation. It was a real wrestling.
Yeah. Well, see,
my body was getting moved.
Yeah. I mean, when I see, I believe the process is absolutely vital. I didn't resonate with what Ian taught at all. It just felt, for me, it felt aggressive and overly, that my soul was doing this, my will. I imposed, it was almost like, because he, in the teaching, as he used like splitting logs and, and it was very seemingly aggressive, which I didn't find that I related to. And actually, then when I went through the process, if I had done that, I would have just been re-emphasizing the power of my soul to separate from my spirit and still be independent. Because I asked God to do it. He took me through the process. When I surrendered, he did it for me. Jesus separated those umbilical cords and reintegrated me, which I didn't see within Ian Clayton's teaching. It was almost like, well, we're supposed to be separate. I've separated this and now we're separate. Rather than, actually, no, I'm separating the wrong soul ties that the soul's had to the spirit. Now the spirit is going to be reintegrated and connected to the soul in the right way with a very, very long tether that can be anywhere dimensionally connected. So, maybe take it back to God and just ask Jesus to, you know, as the living word of God, to do what perhaps is missing from that teaching. I know if I'd done that teaching, it would have just reinforced the power of my soul rather than actually diminishing the power of the soul and actually having the spirit and soul come back together in the right relationship. Because I felt so whole, and after that happened, um, you know, so maybe it's something that you might just sort of take it back to Jesus and ask him to
Yes.
repair any damage that may have been done. So,
Sounds
uh,
like a good
yeah. Yeah, because that doesn't feel right at all. What you're saying, your spirit goes and engages, and you're essentially you can't function. Well, that's sort of, yeah, that's happened to me when I've been put in a trance by God because He wanted to suspend my awareness of this realm to show me fully something in another realm. But I've never felt that okay, my spirit is engaging, and well, otherwise how could you live in dual realms? If that happened to you all day every day, you'd be essentially incapacitated. You know, because Jesus described being in two places at once when he talked to Nicodemus in John chapter 3, when he said, you're talking to the one who's come out of heaven but still is in heaven. And in the original, that some of the more modern translations don't include some of what was in the original. And in the original, it basically is like, he was saying, my home is in heaven, but I'm here at the same time, simultaneously, which is actually what we should all be, to be able to do what was doing, seeing what the Father was doing, and coming out of that relationship with the Father, being in two places and bringing heaven to earth. So how can I bring, and I went through this when I was going into heaven in 2010 to 2012, I was stepping into heaven, spirit and soul. I was stepping out of heaven, spirit and soul. And then I was trying to do here what I'd done there. And there was no flow from there to here because I wasn't there to flow into here. So I was never a gateway of heaven into the earth, because actually I was either in one place or the other. And therefore I wasn't bringing heaven and earth into alignment. But as soon as I was able to stay there in my spirit, I'm a gateway here, because what's flowing through me, my soul, into and my body out into the world, effectively is flowing out of heaven. Which made total sense then of, well, this is how you know what the Father's doing in the heart of the Father, because you're connected with the heart of the Father all the time. Not, I'm going into heaven, I'm going to connect with the heart of the Father, then I'm going to retain what the Father's heart is, and I'm going to step out, and then I'm going to try and do it.
Oh, wow.
Which for me was a works process. Essentially, I was trying to do something on earth that I may have established in heaven, but actually wasn't fully flowing. I wasn't flowing. Yes, the reality, I wasn't flowing. But now it feels like heaven is able to flow through me because I can be in two places. Now, I do engage in that realm with my soul every day. But that's a time where I engage in intimacy with the Father, and I don't need to be doing anything else other than engaging the Father, whether he's engaging in me or I'm engaging with him. It doesn't need to be a sort of a flowing there, because I'm engaging consciously and cognitively in that experience. But whatever I do, I'm continuing to do, in that way. So yeah, there's some interesting things there for you perhaps to go back and ask him to reintegrate you. I think would be the reconnect you from your spirit to your soul. And then step into that realm and don't step back out of it with your spirit. And I'd done a few exercises around that, which was more of a, okay, engage in heaven consciously, and then consciously come back into this realm, but choose for your spirit to stay in that realm, and then actually sense the connection and see how that connection flows, And then whenever you need to engage in that realm, you can then shift your consciousness to engage and still be conscious here, because that's the capacity that you begin to develop, being able to do multiple things. So like right now, I can shift my consciousness to think and engage with where my spirit is in one area in realm 7, and I could describe that to you, but I'm still conscious here as well. So I've learned to increase the capacity to engage those realms at the same time, you know. But I sort of did practice it, really, you know. So I just practiced shifting my consciousness. And then I found that I could shift my consciousness and still be connected here, particularly when I'm doing something that requires me to do that, you know, which particularly would be if I was wanting to describe to you, you know, my throne or sat what I'm doing or sat, then, you know, I need to be able to, either I can close my eyes, be quiet for a few minutes and then come back and talk to you, or actually I can actually connect and talk to you at the same time, which is, you know, what I learned to do over a period of time of just practicing, of shifting and engaging and describing and flowing and everything else. So, yeah. So it sounds like a mission to go on and engage.
Yes.
Awesome. All right. Okay. Anyone
May
else?
I ask just a quick follow-up on that question,
Yeah.
if possible? Thank you so much. Mike, do you happen to recall where in your Engaging God series you teach about separation of soul from spirit?
Yeah. I would taught it the process of separation and reintegration. I taught in the Gateways teaching, and I taught the process there. I think I also taught it at the end of the transformation series, just my experience of what I went through. I think I also shared some of that a little bit there at the end of the transformation series. And we did a whole conference on it, essentially, on engaging the dark cloud. So I went into it with 12, 13, 14 different sessions on different aspects of engaging the soul and the spirit and separating them, but also the engaging the fire of God for the purification of the soul, and lots of different areas of it. We're all part of that process. So, yeah.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
Hi, this is Shar.
Hi.
Sorry, I don't share my screen. I'm getting ready for work and everything. I do have a quick question, Mike. My question is kind of similar to what you were just talking about. When the only way that I can start seeing visions and going somewhere else, I have to be at a complete state of rest. Of course, I'll go and engage through my imagination, but for an example, when I go to sleep at night, I go somewhere every single night. I've been journaling my dreams for the last 3 years, never seen a repeat. And just wanted to know, could you shed a little bit more insight on that? Why is it that I have to be at complete rest, complete like unconsciousness to engage in another realm?
Okay. I mean, I think rest is a really good thing, but rest is not a state of almost unconsciousness. It's a state of mind where we're living in love, joy, and peace. And it's not inactivity, it's just being. So what you're describing is really almost a trance-like state, which is almost like you're having to go into semi-sleep, delta wave sleep almost, for you to be able to engage. But it sounds like you can consciously engage. So you're not asleep per se, or your soul isn't asleep, and so you're describing that as rest. I do that also every night. I engage my soul in the garden with the, you know, lying down in green pastures, and for the restoration of my soul, because Psalm 23 promises the restoration of our soul if we lie down in green pastures. So, you know, I don't try and be consciously awake at night. Some people do, and they call it the night watch, and they try and consciously be there while their physical body's asleep. But there, again, I think there was some teaching Ian Clayton did on it, which again I didn't relate to it. It felt so almost brutal on the body, like, and I think he was like describing trying to stand up and put in your body, trying to be asleep but not asleep. I didn't really relate to it. So my spirit is active all the time. It doesn't need to be sleeping or resting in that sense. It's just being in that realm. But my soul, I choose to go into rest. Now, that isn't actual sleep, but it's not also consciousness, because I like sleeping. I'm very happy. When I go to bed, it's very rarely that after a few minutes I'm awake, because I consciously go and engage, and I release my spirit to also engage. If you can't engage in that realm without doing that, I think it's probably because the soul is hindering that in some way. Maybe there are still issues. Because you say, well, I engage with my imagination, as if that's bad. That's how our imagination is just the place within our mind where we receive information or visionary expression of things. It's like there's a difference between activating your imagination to enter into something than imagining it. See, imagining it means you're making it up. Activating your imagination through a portal of, hey, let's say, I don't know, Revelation 4:1, behold the door standing open in heaven. Well, engaging that with my imagination just activates the truth for me to engage in, and then I engage it. I don't make up what happens afterwards. So imagination is not, you're not sort of using your imagination to fantasize. Your imagination has been given to us for us to connect in a intuitive, creative way that enables us to experience things in those realms through the information that your mind receives. The reality is, no matter what you're doing, it is your mind which is actually able to interpret stimuli and give you an insight into what's going on. You've learned to do that physically. We learn how to see, and through electrical impulses, because it's all electrical impulses in our brain, which is then reinterpreted back into an image. The same happens with hearing. We learn to discern pressure waves in the air, and they turn into cognitive understanding of sound. And obviously we learn particular language in a way which those sounds are meaningful to us. We have to learn that. A baby learns by repetition. And if a baby is living in a dual language household, they usually pick up more than one language at the same time. And all those sounds are all interpreted through electrical impulses. The spirit and the imagination can also be a place for the manifestation or the release of those electrical impulses. So my spirit has, let's say, eyes and ears.
The local time is 13:05.
So it essentially has a flow of information that my mind has learnt to now interpret as spiritual information as well as physical. So my spirit is flowing in passing me information so that I'm aware. And that can come visually, but for most of the time mine is not visual because my eyes are open and I'm just knowing, because my spirit is there. So my spirit's there. How do I know what my spirit is doing? Well, my spirit is passing information, spiritual information about that realm continually to my mind, and all I have to do is focus my mind on it to be able to engage it. Now, I practice to do that. The same as seeing into the spiritual realm. I'm not looking at a visible wavelength of light, but my spirit can interpret wavelengths of light which are beyond the visible. and sounds which are beyond the visible or audible. So, but I practiced to do that. So I kept looking and looking and looking and trying to see. And I was trying to see, obviously, through the only way I knew, my natural eyes. But then, the story of, I think it's Elisha's servant, that Elisha is able to see the fiery chariots and horses all surrounding the city, and therefore he was not fearful of being attacked. But his servant was looking at the same thing and couldn't see it. So Elisha asked God to open his servant's eyes so he could see. Now, it wasn't his physical eyes he was opening, because he had his physical eyes already open. So he was opening his spiritual eyes to be able then, so he could see through that vision that he had within his mind. And if you shut your eyes to everything in the natural realm, you don't have any vision of the natural realm, and you can see the spiritual realm. But there was no indication that he was doing that. He didn't say that he caused him to shut his eyes. It caused him to open his eyes, but they were a different set of eyes, if you like. So he perceived something to be real that he couldn't see with his physical eyes, but was just as real when he tuned into that realm and was able to perceive it. And I think perception is a better use of the word see, because actually that's what we're getting to. Can I discern and perceive what it is that's in this spiritual realm? So, if I engage my spirit with the spiritual realm, then my spirit is able to interpret the wavelengths of light that are in that realm and then pass that information so that I become aware. So, okay, there's an angel over there, there's an angel here, there's a portal here. Well, I'm not seeing that with my natural eyes, but I'm seeing it, and I know it's true, and I can describe it because I've learned to interpret spiritual information. And it is a process of learning. And if Hebrews 5:14 says we practice, our spiritual senses discern through practice. So you just have to keep practicing and engaging, and that's why I do a lot of the engagements within the Engaging God program are just practicing things. They're not an end in themselves. They're just a practice thing to get our spirit activated and to get the connection activated and to connect the discernment of the information that's being passed activated. And that's something I did over quite a few years, and just kept going until it became something I could activate whenever I want. And that's what I did. So I would say, go back to God and ask him, is there something that your soul needs to be in that state of suspension for you to be able to engage? Because I don't think that actually is the truth. I think we can all engage spiritually without having to be in a trance-like state. If God puts you into that state, fine, and he does occasionally do that for me, but less so now. But I wouldn't be looking to try and create a trance-like state for myself. And I would be very much looking to see this as a normal part of everyday life. And therefore, you can't go into a trance when you need to see something spiritually, or go into that state of total rest if you're driving up the street. And you need to see things spiritually as much when you're driving up the street as when you're sat in your chair at rest or in the bed or wherever you are. So I do believe it's probably something which you can overcome by learning to perceive in a different way. And there may be a blockage. There may be something that is blocking you. When you say you use your imagination, how does that work? Are you seeing something? Are you perceiving it? What does your imagination do when you engage with your imagination?
With my imagination, I'll see things. Of course, my eyes will be open, and I'll see things that I didn't make up. So I remember I was with a group of people going to heaven, and it was this flower person that just appeared in my screen when my eyes opened, and I kind of jumped back because I didn't make this up. It's like I didn't. It was kind of alarming. So when I do practice, I do start to see more details, And it's like, wow, is this something that I'm making up? But no, this is a real experience.
Yeah. Okay, well then really then you don't really need to try and go into a deep thing. You are engaging another realm. You are engaging a spiritual realm by engaging, because what you're seeing, you just need to keep practicing until that becomes something which is continual when you want it. I think the other state may be something which is different. Maybe it's sort of something which you think, well, this is more real because I'm in this state, when actual fact, I don't think it needs to be seen like that. So I would just go continually to practice engaging and developing the ability to be able to discern in a more comprehensive way. And that's obviously in different perspectives. That's engaging God on the inside, learning to engage him in our own spirit, in our own soul, engage him in that intimate place, which is essentially a spiritual dimension within us, and also learning to engage him in different realms of heaven, and learning to see into the spiritual atmosphere around us just by keep practicing, because what is happening is the screen of your imagination is getting active and you're perceiving. So I think, that's probably what practicing and sort of, if the other situations happen, well, then go with it. But I wouldn't be necessarily seeking for that as this is more real than what I've been doing in another way. Whenever I had a vision or a trance experience, the actual outworking of it was no more real than the outworking of any other experience I've had using, my spiritual knowledge. Now, I don't activate my imagination in the way I used to, because now I'm living in that realm, and I know I'm living in that realm. Therefore, now I'm just having a flow of information all the time. So I don't sort of, I'm going to try and activate my imagination. Now, if I want to just close my eyes sometime and just go with an encounter, I can, but I don't. Most of what I do is journaling. So, my writing's not good enough with my eyes closed to journal anything. So because I'm using a tablet, which turns it into a Word file. So I'd have some pretty interesting words if I couldn't see what I was writing. So in essence, I just learned to connect with the information that's flowing from the spirit all the time and be aware of it. And sometimes I can be consciously aware of it, and sometimes I am aware of it when I need to. So when I wake up sometimes in the morning, I'm aware of something that's happened to me during the night. And sometimes I wake up in the morning and I'm not. Now I figure I'll be aware of what I need to be aware of, and I don't need to be aware of anything that I don't. So I don't need to go searching for what happened to me in the night if something isn't there that causes me to engage it. So often when I wake up, those first 10-15 minutes, I try and stay in a state of between sleep and wake, because that's the time where some of those things that I may have experienced in the night, or some of the things that come to me in the night, or some of the revelation that maybe, or my soul, then that's the period where I find it quite easy to engage that. Then it'll become a point where, no, I need to consciously engage, so I get up. But I do give myself a little bit of time just to see if there's anything that I need to perceive that's happened to me. Now, sometimes, I've had conversations with people who will tell me the conversation we had in the realms of heaven, but I don't remember. And then I sort of, when I then talk to them, and I sort of say, well, what did I say? And then sometimes that triggers oh yeah. And then sometimes it's just like, oh, that sounds like me, but because it sounds like me, something I would say, or the way I would say it. And I think, okay, well, I must have, but, obviously I accept that what people say, but for me, therefore, I didn't potentially need to know what they were saying to me, Whereas if I then remember the conversation, then I remember the two-part conversation that flows, which may be very different from just, someone connected with me and me saying something to them in the spirit. But, rest for me is not that the state that you're describing. That is almost sleep. Rest, I am fully active and aware when I'm at rest, because I'm at rest now. Because rest is a state of consciousness that's connecting me to all the flow of information that I need in this situation. So I can activate alpha waves, beta waves, delta waves, and theta waves. All those states of consciousness I can have active all the time. And it's a little bit like someone playing the strings of a violin. There are 4 strings, and you can put pressure on one string and it have that one note, but then you can actually bow over all of the strings with different pressures on each string that gives you a fuller sense, but some of them are more flowing than others. So, all the time, I am learning to be less beta wave dependent, which will be my cognitive, analytical, problem solving state. Now, sometimes that's good. When I'm doing some do it yourself at home or whatever, and I'm figuring out, where to cut this piece of wood, and how to measure it and everything else, I don't want to be doing it with my eyes closed or trying to discern it through spiritual means when I can just measure it and mark it and cut it. So I use the different capacities of my mind when I need them in different things. Now, when I'm therefore thinking about, let's say I'm doing some, landscape gardening in my garden, then I'm going to use the more creative aspect rather than just eventually I may need to draw out where I want this to go or there to go, and I'll measure and work it out. But to create that, I will have used my creative sense of how will I want this to be. So I'm using different aspects. And sometimes I need spiritual information. It isn't going to come from my soul at all. And it's not even going to come from my soul's capacity to be creative. It's going to come from my spirit or God's spirit, and therefore a theta wave incursion into my mind will bring a solution could come out of heaven, it could come out of, God's heart, it could come out of anywhere, Now, I don't need those all the time. And so you then really have to be living in a state of actual rest, which then activates everything that you need, in a consciousness state. Then I think we can live, as normal people, or normally supernatural people, whatever you want to put it, and not sort of, not able to live life. I can't go into a trance when I need to do something in a minute that I need to do this now. I need to be able to draw from the different flows of information, revelation, truth that enable me to actually do that in a normal, everyday way. So I can't remember the last time I went into a trance-like state, because most of the time I don't need to go into that state because my mind is not limiting or stopping or blocking a flow. It actually is receiving a flow. But when I was dealing with the gateways of my imagination and that sort of thing, I had to purify the imagination. I had to get Jesus to wash it, the water of the word and the fire of the presence of God to purify my imagination, blood of Jesus to deal with all the images and everything which could come up and block a flow that I was having. So I did go through a process of making sure that the things in the soul weren't hindrances to me living a supernatural life. And there were a lot within my soul, because I'd lived, 50 years of living mostly from what was flowing from the outside in. So there's quite a bit in the gateways or the senses of my soul that needed to be dealt with: my conscience, my imagination, my reason, my mind, emotions, will, choice. All of that was influenced by the way I'd lived and what had happened to me, and trauma and nature and nurture. Those are really the three things that really affect us. And so I went through the process of dealing with trauma, nature, and nurture. So I was not negatively affected by my life in my soul, but was actually now going to be influenced what came from my spirit, and not hindering it, blocking it, or allowing the soul to be independent in that way. So, all right. Okay. Anyone else?
Mike,
Yep.
I've been reading Raising Hell, and I know you've talked about that in different sessions about, people having the, concept of going to hell if you're not saved, and rethinking that. And, I remember you mentioning about being transformed now rather than waiting until after you move on. So folks that still have the mindset of hell as a place, or like their approach, if you will, people that aren't walking with Jesus right now, and so when you introduce them to Jesus, you're not scaring them into heaven. You're trying to give them into a relationship with Jesus.
Yeah.
In a more simplified way, what's the best way to approach that?
Well, to me, it's all based in the nature of God is love, and helping people to discern what God is really like by encountering that love. And that might be encountering love initially through you as a demonstrating the heart of God to people by loving them, and the way in which we treat people is an outworking of the love of God, because it's like we love because he first loved us, therefore we love one another because of what he loves us. So freely we've received, freely we give. So I think the initial engagement with people is they need to see something in us that reflects the love of God, and then we want to introduce them to God himself as love. And I do that by encounters. We do that here by giving people an opportunity of engaging him in a way which God will meet them at their point of need, in a way that's for them is going to be tangible for God's to reveal. Now, you can do that through obviously words of knowledge and things, or gifts that can sort of engage them with, hey, here's a miracle, you've got healed. Hey, God is a good God, he loves you, he wants to heal you. So some of the gifts of the Spirit, I think, are more engaged for helping to connect with people who aren't believers yet in that way. But ultimately, what we tend to do is just, when people are at that point, we just say, okay, close your eyes, and then we lead them in an activation that we feel appropriate. And that might be open a door and Jesus is going to be behind the door, or it could be, lots of different things. Sometimes we do like coming to the prodigal, coming back to the Father. But you have to choose the right one for the right person, because some people may have a real problem with Father. Therefore, if you try and introduce them to the Father, they may, no, I don't want anything to do with any concept of Father. So you do need to be sort of led by the Spirit. But opening a door, which is really saying, hey, choose to engage. Because we're not talking about a physical door, but we're talking about the choice for someone to say, yeah, if God is real, I'm willing to see. And that's really all we're looking for. Then you basically encourage them to relax. We usually encourage someone to relax, close their eyes, just start thinking about a door as a picture in their minds, and then choose to open the door as a symbol of their choice to engage with God, and God is going to meet with them. That's what we do, and we've got lots of testimonies of some amazing encounters where God has met with them in ways which were way beyond that we could have actually known, but God knows. Now, sometimes that will be a tangible, they see it, Sometimes it will be a feeling of peace that comes over them. It can happen in so many different ways, but we allow God to do it rather than get them through the process of the evangelical prayer or go the altar call or do this or that and the other, which is a very modern thing. You know, when you go back into the great, what we call the Great Awakenings, which is sort of the outpourings of God's Spirit through people like Wesley and Whitfield and Jonathan Edwards and others, they never had an altar call and they never had a prayer of salvation. They just met with God's presence in such a way that it usually solicited an emotional response of surrender. And they often cried and sometimes laughed and with joy, but that's how they did it. You know, it was God's presence with people, and we just need to get back to that, I think. But now we can help them to facilitate that presence by a very simple activation. You know, and we've done all sorts of things. You know, picture yourself drinking living water, which is going to bring life to you when you drink it. I mean, all sorts of different types of activations that are all ways of just helping the person to connect with God in a particular way. And then you just continue to trust and encourage them to do the same thing. And sometimes it's like, okay, God is wanting to speak to you. So just close your eyes and some thoughts will come into your mind. And they will be God's thoughts to you. So there's lots of different initial encounters that people can have, which then they're the springboard then for them to continue and pursue that themselves. You know, but the negative side of, you know, trying to scare people into the kingdom, that's not love. You know, God is looking for a heart response from people, and a response that's, okay, well, they're telling me I'm going to go and be punished forever, so I don't want to do that. So, you know, I'll pray this prayer. Really is, you know, it doesn't help. Now, God will still meet people in that, but their perception of the God they're meeting may well be very different from actually who God really is. And therefore, there's a lot of work undoing the damage done by creating this religious image of God as some cosmic punisher of his children, you know, which, yeah. Would you want a relationship with someone who, you know, tortured and tormented their children forever? You know, it's not something that the world really wants, and is mostly rejected. You know, and a lot of that is the biggest issue that a lot of people who are calling themselves atheists they don't believe in a God that would do that. Well, neither do I. You know, I don't believe in a God who does that either. You know, so love is the key all through the whole process of demonstrating it, help them to experience it, and then them continuing then to grow in that experience and getting to know God in relationally, and therefore they will know even more what he's like and how he loves them and how far that goes and everything else. So, yeah.
Thank you. I'm looking forward to your visit in Florida.
Okay. Yeah, that'll be good.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm just working out a few more visits to somewhere, Chattanooga and where is it, Albany, which I thought was in New York area, but it's actually in Georgia. So yeah. I will hopefully be there in August.
Oh wow!
But I'm trying to work that out at the minute, and also I'm hoping to be in Cedar Rapids, I think, which is somewhere near Missouri, I think, or somewhere. Cedar Creek, is that it? Cedar Creek. So that's somewhere near Columbia or somewhere in Missouri. So there's a few places that I might be back later on in the year. So yeah, it'd be good to connect up with people. So awesome. Okay, anyone else got anything else they'd like to ask?
I always have questions, but I'm hoping someone else will ask.
Well, if you got one, ask.
I'll give it a little time for someone else who might be shy, though, please.
Okay.
Just a quick question, Mike, about the the meeting that you're going to have in June at your church with Nancy Cohen and Justin, have you decided whether or not you're going to make that available online yet?
We will definitely be recording it, and we're looking at the logistics of live streaming it. Obviously, it's easy to live stream someone who's doing a session. It's not quite as easy when you've got 4 people, maybe as a panel, that are going to be interacting with an audience that are asking questions and looking to deal with some of the issues we're dealing with. But you know, the conference is pretty much full, and we've sort of squeezed in another 30 seats for people to be able to come. So we sort of made it available as many people as possible. We will definitely be recording it, and we're hoping to be able to live stream it. We just have to work out the technology to be able to make it good for people to catch up, because there's going to be a lot of interaction. So we're going to need to be able to have enough microphones that everyone can be able to hear what's being said, and 4 people having the ability to use stuff. So we're working on it, and hopefully we will, but it will definitely be recorded, both audio and video, hopefully, and so we'll make it available afterwards. But we're hoping to live stream it.
Okay, just wanted to double check.
Yeah, but it will always be live streamed the way we normally do, which is to have it on YouTube, and then people can catch up with it whenever they want, rather than having to get up at some earthly hour for some of you to engage, which is the problem with time zones around the world. For ours it's all very good, but for you, I know it's 5 hours behind for some of you, and maybe some of you are more. So we're trying to. So that's why when we do it, the YouTube videos are there for people to watch whenever that they want to, and they're always will be available for them then post. So, but yeah, we're looking forward to it, and I think it's going to be fun, and hopefully we can really create an atmosphere where people can talk and share without having to fall out or disagree or trying to prove one way is right over another, but say, hey, there's lots of different ways that God is revealing things to us that are all part of the flow. But we are going to obviously talk about some fairly questions that probably don't get talked about too much elsewhere, which will be fun. I'm looking forward to it anyway, but I know some others are having some flack over it already, so this but that's part of what's going on. We're in a place where we need to see. In the beginning of the year, when I did the Vision Destiny 18, one of the things I really felt what God wanted is for us to come to a place where we could honor and respect each other without having to always agree on everything. And I believe that's something that God is working on. But often when he works on it, you get the exposing of where that isn't so much operating, so that it can be seen and brought into the light to say, this isn't the way we should be working with each other. This is, we can relate to one another without having to fall out over crossing every T and dotting every I, because that just brings you back to, well, we now have a formula that you have to believe if you're going to be part of a relationship with us. So I think there is a sense where I know right from the beginning of the year, that was something I believe is on the heart of God, without a doubt. So we're working at that to maybe model something where 4 people with all sorts of different views can actually create an environment where we can openly discuss without the need to biblically agree, which is the problem. If, to be honest, if we weren't using the Bible to actually prove these things one way or another, we wouldn't have all the disagreements that we have. It is people's view or interpretation of the Bible that's created these problems. And where people are drawing a hard, fast line, well, the Bible says this, it's only their interpretation and opinion of the Bible says that they then use to exclude other people who they then are now not in agreement with us because we're right. The need to be right is the problem. And, I don't need to be right, because my right this moment might not be as right next year, as God has revealed some of the things that I now think may not be true next year. So I'm very reticent to come out and say I'm right. I may come out and say, well, this is my present position, but I'm not going to argue over the Bible about that. I want to talk about the things that God has revealed and the encounters that we are having that are actually God revealing himself without us having to come up with a biblical formula. Because it's so much harder to try and agree when there's so many differences of view, so many ways of interpreting the Bible and hermeneutically using tools to understand, exegetically looking at what the Bible says and in context, all of that, all of the framework, whether you believe most of it's future, past, all of those things. I mean, if you multiply them all out, you've got hundreds of thousands or millions actually of points to disagree over. If you think of, I don't know, let's say there's 4 or 5 major views of scripture, then there may be 4 or 5 major views of eschatology, then there's 4 or 5 major views of the overall sense of how God does things, and probably each of those has many sub views, and if you multiply them all out, it's just ridiculously difficult to agree over anything, because we all see things from a different framework. But if you engage with the living word of God and you are looking for him to give you the revelation, and you're open for some of the thinking I might have right now to not be always correct, then I would call that teachable, and therefore God can work with that. When we already know what we believe is absolutely the absolute truth and there is no moving on it, we're already in a box, and God is already in a box that we put him in. And that's not what's going to help us come together and be loving one another when we're looking for a very clear set of criteria that says we can be in relationship or not. And most of those criteria is actually over either what we believe or what behaviors we have as a result of what we believe. And that basically is why we have all these denominations that are excluding each other from relationship. You can't be in my gang because you don't believe what we believe. Now, God wants family. God is about family, and family are groups of people who are all different and unique, but love each other in spite of those differences. That's what I believe God wants to bring us back to. And that requires the willingness to honor and respect and love, even if we don't necessarily see everything from the same perspective. That's okay. I think that will be something that I really want to see an opportunity of doing something that says that is possible. Because I know, having talked to Nancy Cohen, and I've talked to Justin quite a lot, and I know Lindy probably better than I know most people. With Lindy, I've worked through with her practically many different ways of seeing things. And I know we have diverse ways of seeing various subjects, but we love one another and we work together really well. And we're totally poles apart when it comes to how we function. But we both engage heaven. We both engage supernatural things. We're both outworking that. I can teach what I do. She just does it. And we open together different ways of approaching things because we come from such diversity. But we've worked through all of those things, and there are things we don't even need to bother about that we have different views over because it's irrelevant to our relationship. Now I've done a little bit of that with Justin. I've only met Nancy once, and I can guarantee that we've probably got differences of opinion over things. So what? Does it really matter? Not to me, and I'm sure it doesn't matter to her either. And that's what really gives us the opportunity of sharing heart, sharing what we believe God is showing us, and then seeing where all that overlaps. And I think we'll find there's way more that we're together heart to heart in than needs to keep us apart by having a particular belief system. And it's only wanting to prove that you're right that keeps you apart. And I don't want to prove I'm right, because I'm saying, you know, I usually caveat most things where I go speaking is like, don't believe anything I say. And I don't want you to believe anything I say. I want you to, if you resonate with anything I say, or even if you strongly disagree with anything I say, take it back to God and ask him. Because I can only give people information. It may be my revelation, and it may be my testimony. But for someone else, it's information until they get their own revelation and testimony by engaging God for themselves. You know, and I think that's really, if we can have that type of relationships with one another, then we will learn from one another and find that there is so much truth that we can receive from one another. And there's other areas where we probably won't see the same thing, but does that matter? No, I don't believe it does. You know, because I don't believe being part of God's family is based on whether we all agree with every single doctrinal theological position. It's actually, we are all adopted into the same family of God, and he's our dad. We've got the same dad and the same brother, and, you know, depending on how you view the Holy Spirit, the same mother. So in a sense, it's like, you know, we have so much in common. We don't need to be looking at what we don't have, really. That's my sort of process. But it'll be interesting to see how that actually works out in practice. You know, with a whole load of people who are also coming with all sorts of diverse backgrounds and things and opinions and experiences, and they want help to navigate through some of their experiences. Is awesome. You know, so we want to create a safe place for that to take place. Someone actually posted a comment saying, does that mean I can come and rebuke you because where you're wrong? Well, I don't think we'll probably answer that comment, because I think the very question itself, you know, is showing you really don't understand what we're trying to do in creating a safe place, you know. And yes, are you free to have another opinion? Absolutely. Everyone is. And I would never want to take away people's freedom to actually have their opinion in their part of their journey, because I had my opinions and God changed a lot of them, you know, and that was okay. So, you know, I go back sort of, let's say go back to 2011 when I really started to teach some of the stuff about heaven and spiritual realms and, you know, Joshua generation and all that. You know, if I was to teach that now, would it be exactly the same? No, absolutely not. And there are lots of things in there which were my mindsets and belief systems have radically changed. But I'm not going to go back and alter it, because actually a lot of people will also be on the same journey. And actually they may need to relate to where it was there to help them to carry on the journey. So if I go back and tell them things that I know now, it would probably freak them out, which to sort of avoid the journey altogether. So it's okay. And yeah, some of the things I shared in 2011, I wouldn't see the same way, but I did then. And that was part of my journey. So I think it's still valid to say, hey, this is a journey, and our thinking will change as we progress through it, if we're willing for our minds to be renewed, you know, and for us to be restored and to mature in sonship. So yeah, it's a fun journey, definitely a fun journey. So okay, all right, okay, I better leave it there. Anyway, nice seeing you all today.